Brochim Habayim, Erev Tov, Boker Tov, welcome wherever you are in the world today, whether you're just finishing Hanukkah or just getting ready to celebrate Christmas or just needing a break from all of the darkness that seems to be surrounding us these days. Welcome. My name is Wayne Firestone, and for over 3 years, I've been doing these webinars with many of you. I love seeing your names. I love seeing the different locations that you're calling in from. I love the fact that you take an hour in the middle of, for some, a work week, or in the middle of the week when we're doing these on Wednesdays, just to connect with the light that comes uniquely from a place we call Eretz Israel. And even in these dark moments, it's amazing to see what kind of light our friends and colleagues can and do bring to the whole world, and at the moment, to their neighbors. I am excited to share with you that for the very first time in the 3 years that we've been doing this program, and I've been hosting these webinar gatherings, for the first time when I said Erev Tov, I was able to share, I am able to share that I'm doing this live from Israel. This is the first time. It's always been since COVID. The last time I was here, I just saw Debbie in Texas, who checked in from, was with me on a delegation that we brought from AIFL here in Israel. Debbie, great to see you in the audience today. Great to see friends, my friend Jean in North Carolina. It is really, Wendy Salkin, I see, has joined us. A lot of familiar names, a lot of friends who have seen our program. And I suspect many of you are here for the same reasons. We're all looking for some hope. We're all looking for some light. We're all looking to figure out how we persevere even in dark and difficult times. So I think that's going to be my question for you today. At this moment, in this season, with all the many challenges we face, what's bringing you hope? What's brought some light into your lives? And what's helping you to persevere? What are the stories or the people or the films or the books? And if you don't have a strong answer yet, you will hopefully by the end of our episode today, because we have one of my favorite returnee guests, panelist, Gabriela Vainsencher, who has joined me on these episodes in happy times and in less happy times. And we have been able to introduce some of the artists, both in the United States and in Israel and around the world, who have those qualities of being able to hold together, even in difficult times, ways to look at ores of, or a ray of light, and maybe help us look at the world in a different way. And so for all of you that are looking for something, we hope you'll accept this as our present, and either a belated present or an early present. You can wrap it and put it under a tree, or you can pass it on. We offer this for free. It's something that we've done because we feel it's really important to build community, and to do so in a way that is positive and that uplifts people. And my friend and colleague from doing this, Gabriela, brings us each time new ways to look at art and new ways to look at the world with her own artwork, with her insights into the work of her colleagues, and is so generous with her time. Even though she's got a newborn that wants a lot of her time too, she gives us some of her time so that we can together sort of escape a little bit. It is a little bit of an escape. It's a little bit of a distraction at this moment. We recognize that, but art plays that role as well. We've rated for the right time. And now, as a year-end present to everyone, I'm gonna pass the baton to Gabriela. She has a lot of great material to share with us today. And excited, Gabriela, even though we had to have a pause before we could do this, that we're back to do it to end the year in an uplifting way.
Thank you, Wayne. Thanks for having me. Apropos my baby, you might hear him resisting his noon nap. I can assure you no babies are being harmed at this time. You were asking about what brings people solace at this time, and I want to share that. So when the war broke out on October 7th, I was actually supposed to have a gallery tour that day in New York. I canceled it immediately, even though it wasn't really clear what was happening, but something was happening, and I canceled it. And my initial reaction was, this is no time for art. And I canceled everything. I canceled my in-person tours. I canceled my Zoom lectures right away, and was very, very conflicted about, well, what is the place of art in this time? Is it escapism? Is it like obscene to even think about art and beauty at a time like this? These were my concerns, both as an artist and as someone who talks about art. And the first email I got about 2 weeks, like still in October, I got an email from an organization called Larger Than Life that supports Israeli families of children who are undergoing treatments at Sloan Kettering Hospital, cancer treatments. And they said that the parents there have asked to have a gallery tour in New York, and would I volunteer to do a gallery tour for them? And of course I volunteered. I would have paid them to do it. It made me so happy to not only contribute and help, but to hear that people going through their own huge crisis on top of the crisis in Israel felt like what they needed to feel better is to look at and think about art. And I also wanted to share with you that I have gone back to in-person tours and lectures and Zoom lectures in the recent weeks. And a week ago, a woman came to my tour in the galleries who is a survivor from the massacre in Kfar Aza, who lost a family member there and who miraculously escaped herself. And she was at the end of a lecture tour speaking about what she had gone through. And she had 3 days to rest in New York before going back to Israel. And she wanted to do a gallery tour. And to me, that is the biggest affirmation of the role of art in our lives. And I felt like that was the biggest kind of solace that I got, because it showed me that even someone who, I consider myself, of course, I grew up in Israel. I lived there until my 20s. I have family there. My friends are there, but I don't consider myself as directly affected as this woman and her family, of course. And to hear that this was of some use to her, first of all, gave me an amazing feeling of being able to contribute. But I think it also speaks to what we need as people to nourish ourselves so that we can continue on, both in our own lives and in supporting others. It's okay to nourish yourself. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to have pleasure. It's okay to have to experience beauty and to think about things outside of it. Not only is it okay, it is necessary. Kind of like on the airplane, you put on your oxygen mask first before you help your child. It's not because you matter more than your child. It's because your child needs you to be strong, to support them. So that is what I learned in the past couple months. Yeah, so I wanted to share that. Okay, so for today, I I prepared for you. I'm gonna share my screen, and I'm also gonna tell you a little bit about myself before we start, for those of you who are meeting me for the first time. Just a moment. So I am a recurring panelist for AIFL, and I am also an artist. I make sculpture and photography and video, and I show with a gallery in New York. And I also talk about other people's work, both in person and in Zoom lectures. And I am always very, very interested in many aspects of why and how people make art. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So when I talk about someone's exhibition, someone's artwork, I'm both interested from the outside. So, what are we looking at? How is this, how does this make sense? What is the story or the concept behind an exhibition? But I'm also very interested in behind the scenes. Why does someone make the work that they make? What are their motivations? How has their life led them to making this kind of art? And also technically, I'm an artist myself, so I'm always thinking from the studio perspective. How is an artwork made? What is the technique? What are the processes? And so I always look at art from all these various angles. And today I brought you 3 exhibitions, very, very different people making very different work, but in my mind, all had an uplifting aspect to them, very, very different. So you'll see. We're starting from, this is the first exhibition I took the Sloan Kettering families to, the Larger Than Life organization to. Yeah, this is a gallery. It's Gladstone Gallery, but it's their outpost on 67th Street. So it's on the Upper East Side there near the hospital. And that was my first thought, is I just want things to be easily reached. But I was so happy when I saw that they had a Vivian Suter show, because I felt like this is the perfect artist to share with these families. So here's Vivian Suter. She is a Swiss Jew who was raised, no, I'm sorry, Argentinian Jew from Eastern European origins, like myself, who was raised in Switzerland. And Suter she's the daughter of also a pretty successful artist. Her mother, who was a very different kind of artist, made more like collages and graphic design. And Vivian herself was starting to have something of an art career in Switzerland in her 20s and 30s. And then some stuff happened in her personal life. And also she felt like she needed to take a step back. And she actually disappeared from the art world for a few decades. I was introduced to her work. This woman is 74 years old and has been making art for longer than I've been alive. But I was introduced to her work on the High Line. The High Line is elevated train tracks in New York that have turned into one of the most beautiful parks in the city. So I saw her work for the first time a few years ago on the High Line when she hung her paintings. This is how she shows her paintings, often outdoors, literally outdoors, hung very simply from little strips of wood, and just they were displayed like that for 4 months, taking the elements, the rain, the sun, the bird poop, just like this. And I remember when I saw this show, I was like, who is this person, and how have I never heard of her? So apparently, when she was about 35, she left everything behind and went here. This is Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. It's a volcanic lake. It's inside an extinct volcano. I've actually been here when I was in my, Israelis go backpacking in their early 20s, and so did I. And I backpacked here, and it's really one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. And she made this her home for many decades. This is she has a few studios at home. She lives on kind of this compound, basically on the side of a mountain going down into Lake Atitlan. A lot of her studio space is outdoors. As you can see, this is in a little covered porch. And she started living here and making her paintings there. And everything I'm telling you now, we know, and I know now because in the early 2000s, a curator who had put her in a group show back in the early 90s remembered her and went looking for her, found her, and started showing her work again. And now she's showing in biennials and in galleries and in museums all over the world. But what we now know is that, so she moved here and she was living in Atitlan and making her paintings. And you can see some of her paintings next to, this is literally outside her studio. You see a little green roof. That's part of her house and studio. She bought an old coffee plantation that is no longer producing coffee. And she lives there and she has a few buildings. She lived there with her mother until 5 years ago when her mother died at a very advanced stage. And there were two major storms on the property in the late 90s. And what happened was Vivian knew there was a storm coming. They had to get out of their house, go somewhere else. And she knew there had been mudslides. And when she came back home to the studio, she couldn't open the door because the studio was full of mud up to, in some places waist high, in some places ankles high, just full of mud. And she had to wait until the waters receded and the mud receded and to go see what she could salvage. And her paintings were all, you could say, destroyed. But when Vivian saw these paintings, she didn't think they're destroyed. She thought, oh, that's so interesting what the mud had done. And she started showing her work like that. She decided this is the right situation for the work. I'm going to cooperate with nature. Not only did she start showing her work, like now that she is showing her work, she shows it like that. She shows all the flooded paintings. She now works outside. So she'll take a painting, she'll start it inside, then she'll go outside, put it on the jungle floor, let kind of nature take its course, take it out, make some more painting on it, put it back in the mud. This is a woman who lost everything in a way and decided to, instead of having that be the ending point, be a turning point. And I find that so inspiring, so interesting as an artist, and so inspiring as a person. And she's extended this approach also to her materials. So she will leave her paint cans open outside and let animals get in there and let rainwater get in there and change the color and change the chemistry of the paints. And then she will use those paints again inside her paintings. Her paintings are very intuitive. There's something between abstract painting and paintings of natural motifs. So you see here a shape that kind of looks like a seed pod. And also you see the cross. That cross is the stretcher bar, the thing that you could stretch a painting on. So she is referencing that, but of course we also see a cross, so it could have a spiritual meaning. And not only does she let kind of chaos and chance and risk have a role in her artwork, she also hangs her work like this. So she doesn't stretch her paintings on stretchers and hangs them neatly in the middle of a wall. When she has a show, and this is whether it's in her gallery or in a museum or in the Venice Biennial, she, with the curators, will hang the paintings in layers. So you can see, for example, this painting that is right in the middle of the frame, that kind of yellowish pinkish painting. Here it is. So sometimes she'll hang a painting horizontal and sometimes vertical. Every time the paintings are hung, they are hung in layers. They change. She changes the way she hangs them every time, kind of to fit the space also that they're in. It doesn't matter if they are obscuring one another a little bit. This is another installation view from the gallery in the Upper East Side. The paintings are hanging very much talking with the architecture. This is the special, very special architecture of the townhouses of the Upper East Side that this gallery is in. It's almost like walking through a bit of a jungle to visit her exhibitions. Some paintings are on the floor. I had a big group there. Some people were accidentally stepping on the paintings. The person from the gallery did not have a heart attack, which is what they usually do if you step on an artwork, because the point is not only to not be so precious about these things, but that part of making this work is acknowledging the mess and chaos of life, and acknowledging that, like, sometimes your dog sits on your canvas while you're making it, and sometimes a visitor to the gallery will step on it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing that happened to the painting. It's just something that happened to it. You can see in this painting, she also often will leave branches, pieces of earth or dirt, close up a little bit, and leaves onto the paintings. Of course, they are not crazy archival, this work. This work will definitely, even though she's very popular with collectors and museums, I think people understand that some of this work will yellow and deteriorate a little bit in time because she uses a lot of natural materials in the paintings and not just paint on canvas, which is a very archival material. But that's part of it, and that's okay. Here's another, so you could see, I'm going to back up for a moment. You can see this painting here close to the floor, hanging behind the blue and white painting. And here it is on its own. So again, something that's both abstract, but also reminds you a little bit of a landscape, maybe a sunset or a sunrise. And they're very much team players, these paintings. They're not really meant to be shown by themselves. They're meant to be shown together. They're meant to be shown as an environment. More than individually, although the gallery does sell them individually. Here's the painting that was above the fireplace there. Also, it's rotated because when she hung it, she decided to hang it on its side. So this is Vivian Suter at a recent show at Gladstone Gallery. And I didn't say this before, but I welcome any of your questions. You can write them in the chat, and Wayne will kind of collate them at the end of my talk, and then I'll answer. We'll go backwards. If people have questions about this show, this artist, write them down, and then I'll kind of revisit them and answer any questions. So the next artist I want to show you, a very different artist, but happens to be in the same gallery. This is Ugo Rondinone at Gladstone Gallery, also a Swiss artist. And you can see this is what the show looked like. It recently closed in the Chelsea location of the same gallery. So on the Upper East Side, they have this ornate, beautiful, narrow townhouse. And in Chelsea, they have one of these post-industrial structures with beautiful skylights and the polished cement floor. And really, this really helps the gallery show different kinds of artists who show different kinds of work, because these huge sculptures, which we'll get into in a moment, these couldn't even fit in the door of their 64th Street location. And they very much need to be in a large space. Rondinone, as we're going to see, also makes a lot of outdoor sculpture. But there's something about seeing this kind of giant minimalist sculpture inside the very industrial space that really gives it's like a dramatic stage for the work. So this is Ugo in his studio working with some maquettes for some of his sculptures. So as I said, he both shows work in museums and galleries and also out on the street. One of his favorite projects, my favorite projects of his, was made for the Public Art Fund in Manhattan. This is no longer up. But he made this series of humanoid sculptures made from rocks. This is one of his favorite materials, is to take raw rock and stones that are often relevant to the space that they're in. So this rock was made from Manhattan's schist, I think that's how you say it, schist, which is the kind of bedrock that Manhattan is made from. And he builds these kind of colossal human figures. There's something that feels very archaic about them, very ancient, but also they communicate so nicely with the urban landscape, right? They're sitting in the middle of a canyon of skyscrapers. So they're both monumental. They have a very interesting relationship to scale, right? Because they're both monumental in comparison to us, the people who can, walk between their legs. But they're also kind of tiny comparison to the skyscrapers that they're near. So this is also something that recurs in his work, a very, very interesting relationship with scale. The personal scale, our scale of our bodies, and the scale of, can you hear my baby crying? Sorry about that. But also the scale of nature or man-made architecture. One of his most famous sculptures that I wanted to show you is this one. It's called Seven Magic Mountains. It was made out in the desert. It's still outside of Las Vegas. And before I keep talking about this work, I brought you a video of Rondinone talking about this project. And whenever I can, I love to bring videos of artists talking about their own work, both because I think it so humanizes the endeavor, to see that something was made by an actual person, and not just kind of appeared out of nowhere. And also, I like when I'm able to show a little bit people how they think, how they work, even what their body language is like. I think it helps understand the work on a more human level. So here are a minute and 47 seconds with Ugo Rondinone talking about this project, and then we will continue.
5 years ago, I've been invited by the Nevada Museum to develop a new artwork in the desert. So I wanted, as my whole work, it's built on duality, or needs this dynamic of duality. That's when I came up with the idea of 7 magic mountains, to use boulders, stacking them over each other, and complete a hoodoo mountain. Hoodoo mountains are stone formation that you find all over the world, but here in America you have many of them in Utah. And so I wanted, my 7 magic mountains are a direct reaction to the hoodoos. So in the landscape, I wanted to do the contrary what I did in the city with human nature, by painting the stone in day glow. The day glow color is the more artificial color that you can get. And 7 magic mountains stays in a stark contrast of its surrounding. And it's a given that when you put something in contrast, that it elevates the other part. So I hope that people who look at this piece, 7 Magic Mountain, will extend their view to the surrounding and the landscape, and will appreciate the landscape of Las Vegas. The benefit of public sculpture on public ground is that everybody can share it. And that's my main motivation to do art, and going out to the world and presenting art. And in a way where everybody can relate.
So that's Ugo Rondinone on Seven Magic Mountains. And I'll kind of recap a little bit of what he was talking about. So he said the words hoodoo mountains, and this is what he's talking about. These are natural rock formations that happen a lot in Nevada, but also in that area of the United States. This is the result of wind and water over, millennia and more on the rocks. And he wanted to make a response to these rock formations that are found in this region. So he was invited by the Nevada Museum of Art to make a temporary artwork for one summer. The work has now been there for a few years because it's proven one of the most popular public artworks in Nevada, and millions of people have visited them. And what he did is, again, he says, my work is about duality, and we very much can see that in the work, right? He talks again about this thing about the landscape versus the personal scale. So there's that duality of our scale and the larger than us scale of nature, and how those works are kind of something in between. He talks about the day glow colors. So here's a process picture of these rocks actually being cleaned. They have to be cleaned and repainted every once in a while. He chose to use day glow colors because they are the least natural colors there are. They are the most artificial colors he could think of. So he also wanted to have that duality or contrast between the colors of nature and the colors of man, the things that only we can create. But he is also very thoughtful and cognizant of natural needs around him. So while some other artists would have probably painted these with auto body color, but that's a very toxic process. Rondinone didn't want to release so much toxic chemicals into the landscape he was working in. So the rocks are actually painted with an eco-friendly paint that's wonderful, but also washes off very easily and gets kind of muddied very easily from the elements. So they have to be cleaned and repainted every once in a while. He also wasn't planning on this work to be outside for as long as it has been, because it's proved so popular. So Seven Magic Mountains is really another way that we see his approach to the scale between man and nature, and the distance between man-made things and nature-made things. The rocks, the boulders are real, natural, huge boulders, whereas the colors are, of course, very much a product of our work. And I think of Rondinone's work in general as kind of a descendant of a very American way of making art, which is called earth art. So earth art is a stream of art. There's like Impressionism and Post-Impressionism and Cubism in Europe. Well, in the States, one of the most important art movements to have come out of American artists is earth art. Art that uses both the materials of the landscape of nature as the materials to make it, but also uses the scale of nature. This is one of the most famous earth art works in the US. It's called the Spiral Jetty. As you can see, it is literally a spiral jetty. You can see little cars in the car park there above it to give you a sense of scale. It was made by this guy, Robert Smithson, in the 1970s and 74, I believe it opened to the public. The work is still being maintained by the Dia Foundation. Some of you may have visited the Dia Beacon Museum in upstate New York. This is part of that same collection. Robert Smithson died young, by the way. He died in a helicopter crash surveying the spiral jetty before he was 30. But the artwork remains. And he was part of a group of artists, among them also Michael Heiser. Michael Heiser is still with us. This is a very famous work of his outside of LACMA, the LA Museum of Contemporary Art, where he created a walkway and placed this giant boulder on top of the walkway that you walk under when it's between buildings of the museum. Again, a work that is supposed to put you in connection with nature and those scale shifts between the human scale and the man-made scale and the natural scale. Michael Heiser, by the way, recently completed work on this project, A City in the Desert. This is a city-size sculpture that he worked on for about 50 years, and he just finished it. There was a big article about it in the New York Times. So I think Rondinone takes from these guys, and of course also very much from this guy, pop art from Andy Warhol. I think Rondinone very much takes the scale and materials of earth artists and the colors and poppiness of pop art, two very American ways of making art that both came to be in the 1970s, and puts them together in his work. So to come back to the exhibition in Chelsea, this is a series of bronze sculptures. So these are bronze sculptures painted day glow. And I brought you some pictures of their process of making. So this is in his studio slash home slash church that he remodeled in the Bronx. And you can see this is just the beginning of this project. He basically printed it out on inkjet paper and made a cardboard maquette to start. Very, very simple, just to kind of figure out the scale of them, how big they should be, how they should be in relation to a person. And he made these in his beautiful studio. So this is where he lives and works. This is a church that he bought and spent millions of dollars remodeling, rehabbing, and filling with his own personal collection of art, both his work and other people's work. I can imagine it's such an inspiring place to live and work in. And you can see on his dining room table are maquettes of the work from the same body of work that Seven Magic Mountains came from. So for fun, I just brought you some pictures of his house because it's really impressive. Even in the bathroom, he has this artwork, which is a screen mural by the artist Urs Fischer. And in the bathroom, he has an artwork of his bathroom. So when he plans a show, what allows him, this giant studio allows him to do two things. He can both build large-scale maquettes, models of his work, but he can also do this. This is something that a lot of artists do, artists and galleries. They build a scale model of the museum or gallery where they're going to show their work, and then create tiny, tiny little doll-shaped, doll-sized versions of the artwork to hang on the walls. So he is very fortunate that he gets to do both. He both gets to kind of have that bird's eye view of a scale model and also make things the size that they're going to be in his studio and kind of live with them and look at them for a duration before his show comes up. These are his paintings. So I think it's really interesting that his paintings themselves look like pieces of architecture. They're all very, very simple. His work is always very simple and has this kind of kick of scale and of color. So what he did to make the work that we're going to go back to looking at soon is he took some tree branches and he cut them and molded them, like changed them a little bit, trimmed them, added pieces until he got the shape he wanted. He then 3D scanned them and enlarged the scan to create bronze sculptures of these branches. So it's not like he found branches this size. He was working with small branches, made his sculptures that required very minimal intervention of the sculpture, of the branches themselves, scanned them, and then had his scan made in bronze at an outside location, a foundry. He then had these sculptures painted this day glow kind of greenish yellow. So there's something both very kind of unreal about them, and when you come close, you really, really see the texture of the wood, because bronze takes on the texture of whatever you cast in it very, very well. And in front of these sculptures is one other piece. So there's the three lightning, they're lightning bolts is what he calls them. So they come from roots and branches and they become these lightning bolts when he enlarges them and paints them these colors. In front of them is one more single sculpture. And this is one of his clouds. So I'm going to show you another one and then we can get a close-up on it. So this is a series of sculptures that kind of go with the lightning bolt. So, right, you need a cloud to make a lightning bolt. And these ones are made from concrete and gravel. So again, this very beautiful duality or dichotomy in his work, a cloud that's like the most ephemeral thing, the most impossible to kind of grab thing, he makes from the most heaviest, kind of earthiest, simplest materials of cement and gravel. So this is Ugo Rondinone, also at Gladstone Gallery, this time in Chelsea. And the last show I brought to share with you belongs to the Frick collection. So the Frick collection, some of you may know it. It's on Museum Mile in Manhattan. The Frick was someone's home, as a lot of these amazing museums often are. If you've ever visited it, it's one of the most amazing places to visit in New York. It's a palace that not only is a museum in itself, the home of Frick, who was the collector, also holds his collection. So this is one of the best collections in the world of Rococo artists. He has some of the best Rembrandts in the world, things that museums don't have. And usually to see the Frick collection, you have to go to the Frick home and see the work as they were installed when Frick and his family lived in the home. However, the Frick is currently undergoing renovations. And during that time, they leased somewhere to show the collection so that it doesn't stay in storage for a few years. And the place that they leased is the Breuer building. So the Breuer building on Madison and 75th Street for many, many years was the home of the Whitney Museum. For those of you who've been here, it is a very unusual building in the landscape in New York. Actually, Israel has a lot of architecture that kind of looks like this. This kind of beyond Bauhaus, it's more of a brutalist type of architecture. A lot of cement, a lot of black and gray, a lot of pure shapes. And it's really doozy to see this collection in its temporary home. You can see these are the very famous ceilings of the Breuer building that are kind of these open cinder blocks. Very architectural windows in this building that really frame the city around them into these tableaus. And it's so beautiful to see these paintings no longer near other kind of gilt furniture and heavy curtains, but juxtaposed with this gritty urban landscape. It's really an amazing opportunity to see work in a new light, quite literally. And so the Frick is doing a lot of interesting things while they're at the Breuer. The Breuer, by the way, is named after the architect who made it. It was called the Whitney, then it was called the Met because the Met had it for a few years, and now the building is just called the Breuer. I think that the next owners are either Sotheby's or Christie's, I can't remember. One of the big auction houses actually bought the building, and they're going to be the next tenants. But so the Frick is doing a lot of interesting things in their building while they're undergoing the renovations. And one of them is this show that we're here to see, Barkley Hendricks. So this is a posthumous show for this artist, Barkley L. Hendricks. He is, I think, one of the most important African-American artists of the 20th century. into the 21st century, has been a huge influence on many, many artists working today. I'll show some of them. And what he became known for is working in old master techniques and old master formats. But instead of depicting inside this painting of a beautiful golden dome, instead of depicting a Christian saint or a white male Western king, he decided to populate his images with the people from his community, with the people from his family, with his friends around him. This is maybe his most famous portrait. And you can see how the first thing we notice is the beautiful relationship between this woman's afro and the golden halo that she is situated within. And this is really how he worked. He took mostly African-American people, not only. He painted his wife a lot. His wife was white. Mostly African-Americans, whether they were people who were his neighbors or his students when he was teaching art, or his friends and colleagues. And he is one of the first artists to decide to make this choice in their art. This is both an artistic choice and a political choice. He says, the art world is missing portraits of people who look like me. If you look back at art history, at the Western world's art history, at the old masters, you don't see a lot of people of color that are not depicted as servants or as others or as exotic people. He says, where are the dancers? Where are the flaneurs? Where are the interesting people? And he's populating his work with these people, and always the kind of formula that he uses are very, very detailed portraits with a lot of focus on what people are wearing inside these stark color fields of a background. So sometimes the background is completely white. Look at this beautiful portrait of this guy in the trench coat, and it's white on white. He almost disappears into the white in his body, but then his shoes are black, and his beautiful black and brown skin and hair. And if we get a close-up, this is actually a reflection of the windows of Barkley Hendricks' studio. He grew up in Philly, and he lived in Philly most of his life. And even if we do a little more close-up, you can see the artist himself in the bottom right corner of the glasses. So it's representation inside representation. We like to say a lot in the art world, representation matters. It matters to see people who look like you on the walls of the museum. It matters to see that there are artists who look like you, who are successful and don't try to play the game that someone else is playing, but are sharing their own content. By the way, when Barkley Hendricks paints these reflections, a lot of what he's doing is referring back to art history. This is one of Van Eyck's most famous paintings, the Arnolfini wedding. Jan van Eyck was known not just as an important painter, but a real innovator in terms of optics and perspective and illusionistic space. He painted a lot of mirrors and a lot of optical devices in his paintings. So I brought you a little close-up of the rounded mirror that is in the painting that shows the back of the couple, of the wedding couple. And this is a painting that was definitely on his mind when he was making this portrait with the reflection. Before we keep going, I brought you a short video of Barkley Hendricks speaking. So he passed away in 2017, as I told you, but He left a lot of interviews and videos, and I think it's nice to hear him talking a little bit about his work. So here is, again, almost 2 minutes with Barkley Hendricks. This is a little clip of a Tate shots, a Tate video that I brought you, made by the Tate Museum in London. Okay.
When I was in London, I went to the National Gallery and there were students doing copies from masters. This is in 1966. And I saw a painting that kind of rocked me and I wanted to do a copy. So I went out to get supplies and something hit me. It was like a bolt of lightning. And it said, you can't copy somebody else. That was a significant moment in my life that if I was going to be involved in art, it would have to be from me. I'm trying to make a statement on my own with a degree of history and the materials and techniques. When I first started painting, most of those paintings were people that posed for me. When I was at Yale, I was assistant teaching, and Jules was a part of the class. Jules was a beautiful, skinny dude. I guess he's about 6'6", 6'7". That's what he said for me. My camera I call my mechanical sketchbook. It allows me to get information, and I'm fast, but I'm not as fast as the camera. I want it to be what I call memorable. I don't want it to go poof. You go into certain galleries, there are a lot of other artists there, but I'm damn sure I want you to remember mine.
So that's a little bit of Barkley Hendricks talking about his work. A side of his work that's less known is his photography, and you saw him with his camera, his digital sketch, his mechanical sketchbook, as he called it, not digital. This is a self-portrait from the 70s, and it very much, of course, is in relation to that Arnolfini wedding image that I showed you. He loved photographing mirrors, putting frames in frames, photographing both self-portraits and other people through the mirror. And he thought a lot about, it wasn't by chance that he was interested in the way people stand in front of a mirror. He thought a lot about pose, how his subjects stand for the camera, for the viewer, for the painter, for us. And there's a very nice juxtaposition at the Frick show between work from the collection. By the way, this is a frame from a 3D gallery tour that you can take on the Frick website. There's beautiful juxtapositions between work in the collection and Hendricks's work. And about this painting, I heard a beautiful talk by this artist. This is Kehinde Wiley. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about who he is in a moment. And he said that Barkley Hendricks is one of the biggest influences on him and on many painters of his generation. He was born around the time, he was born in the 70s, around the time that Barkley Hendricks made a lot of these paintings in the show. You may know Kehinde Wiley's work from this portrait that he made. He made the official portrait for President Obama in this kind of lush landscape, lush kind of greenery. His paintings usually look like this. This is kind of his MO. He paints contemporary African Americans in art historically inspired backgrounds and positions, poses, and artifacts, right? Like swords or riding a horse. And what Kehinde Wiley said he learned from Barkley Hendricks, he said the biggest lesson that he learned was about how Black people in America pose, and both Black people in America and Black people in Africa. He said, Kehinde Wiley said this, he said, there's something about the poses that people strike in these paintings that are both very casual, but so cool and elegant. And he says, and so our own, like there's a language in the way you present yourself, the way you cock your collar, the way you stand, that Kehinde Wiley found extremely, he saw himself there. It resonated with him, and he very much uses it in his own work. Another painter who's very influenced by Barkley Hendricks is Amy Sherald, who again you may know from the other official portrait of the Obamas, the official portrait of Michelle Obama that she did. And Amy Sherald, who's from Baltimore, very much takes both this decision to represent African Americans in her paintings, to paint them wearing their clothes, their fashion, the way they show themselves to the world. And she even goes another step farther and uses these flat backgrounds. These are all very, very clearly Barkley Hendricks homages. And all these paintings I'm showing you in this show were made in the 70s mostly. Note how he always cuts the frame right at top of somebody's head and where their feet are. There's something like they're barely contained by the frame. They're barely contained by our gaze. Here on the right, by the way, is a portrait of his wife, who he painted over and over again over the years. She said that she learned from posing for this portrait that it's very, very hard to stand in high heels with your eyes closed. But I love how in the show they juxtapose her portrait and this other beautiful portrait on the left with work from the collection. So these are the two Barkley Hendrickses, and they're standing in front of two James Whistler portraits. And by the way, the Frick used to be one of Barkley Hendricks's favorite museums to go to. And the curator, one of the two curators for the show, tells the story that he was always getting in trouble when he went to the Frick because he was always taking pictures in there with his camera, and you're not allowed to take pictures. But he has a lot of pictures of the collection himself in his photo collection. This work is not in the show, but I wanted to show it to you. That a little bit about the connection between his paintings and his photography and his multiple visits to various places in Africa. So this paintings was inspired by this photograph that he took of 4 nurses in their nurse uniform, and how he said even though they're all wearing the uniform, they're all so different. Everyone kind of wears it a little different, kind of carries her a little differently. And he really wanted to bring that individuality to the painting. In general, his photographs, these are some more of his photographs, very much you can see how the paintings come from them and how in tune he is with street fashion, the way people present themselves, both in their poses and both in what they choose to wear. Look at this photograph, how he caught these 2 guys in front of the colored backgrounds of the wall painted behind them. This already looks like a Barkley painting, a Barkley Hendricks painting. And one of the things I think is really meaningful, so this painting is from the 70s, late 70s. On one hand, they're kind of a time capsule, right, of the kind of fashion and jewelry and accessory that people were using, but they also feel so alive and so contemporary. There's something about the humanity that shines through his paintings that I think keeps them very, very engaging and very fresh. And they don't feel like 50 or 60-year-old paintings. They feel very much from this moment. This is one of his famous self-portraits in the studio. And you can see both his record collection in the back, kind of out of focus, and his camera and his paintbrushes and his style, all the things together that kind of bring what his style was like, both as a painter and as a photographer. So I want to leave some time for questions. Wayne, if we have them, I haven't looked at the chat yet.
Sure. Yeah, no, we do. Actually, we're already at the top of the hour, so I'm going to ask you a question that was asked about one of the artists, and I think I'm curious to hear your answer as well about all three.
Sure.
There were a lot of comments about the work that depicted from Rondinone of the tree, and some people saw the lightning bolt, some people saw dancers, some people had questions about what those pieces were called. Like, did he name them?
I'm so sorry. I'm so bad. I never say the titles. They're all called lightning, and they have like a number.
They are called lightning.
Yeah.
And the sort of question about the other two artists as well. I mean, I think particularly for Vivian Suter's work, given that she sort of seems unconventional in the sense of being willing for some of her pieces to be damaged, if I could call it that, or changed. Absolutely. Or whatever. Does she put names on all these pieces, or there's a sort of informality to
very much informality? And those are great questions. Yeah, she does not title her work, and that's very much, she doesn't even date the work. And this is all very much on purpose. So to her, just because she started a painting in 2005, doesn't mean that that's the year it was completed, because then maybe she'll put it out in the rain for a year. And as far as she's concerned, the work also changes every time she displays it. Sometimes she'll hang it like on its side, and then it's a totally different thing. Sometimes it's behind a different painting, and then they become one thing together. So she neither titles nor dates the work, which I'm sure makes her gallery's life very complicated. But it's definitely it's on purpose, and it's part of the conceptually how she thinks about her work.
And I just have to ask you, because of that anecdote you shared about Barkley Hendricks sort of being a rule breaker, let's say, at the Frick in the early stages of his career. And of course, you've showcased for us so many different artists in our series together of people who are doing things differently. What would you like? What is the significance that both from a representational perspective, but also just the kind of art that one might expect that breaks rules? Why is it that the Frick today will actually embrace, and perhaps other galleries and other collections, people that would never be represented or shown in some of the galleries in New York and in other places? Why is that maybe today more I don't know, acceptable?
Well, I want to first, that's a great question too. I want to make a distinction for Barkley Hendricks. On one hand, yes, he was a rule breaker in that he took pictures everywhere, but he is by no means like an outsider artist. He mentions in his interview that he went to Yale. So he went to PAFA in Philadelphia, which is a very kind of classically trained school. And then he goes to Yale for painting. So he very much is coming from inside the art world and very much revering the history of art and wanting to make a place for himself and realizing he has to forge his own path in there. But I think he was a rule breaker, both with his camera and with the fact that he chose to represent these people who were not kind of classical subjects. And he was ahead of his time, and he wasn't that successful in the beginning, and he was always an art teacher to make ends meet, I'm assuming, on top of everything, before he did become successful in his lifetime. And I have to say, the Frick, while this show is amazing and very long overdue, this is the first exhibition they've given an artist of color in their history. And they are kind of late to this party as well, I have to say. The art world has been in a period of reckoning for a long time, about how white it is and how Western it is, and how much it doesn't show and doesn't feature the voices of people outside of this rubric of the white male artists. Until very recently, this was the case. Still today, more than 90% of the collection of the MoMA is by male artists. Now, in past years, there's been a huge improvement. In the art world, specifically after the elections of Donald Trump, there was a huge swing in that direction, a political swing inside the art world in relation to that elections to start representing the voices and the viewpoints of underrepresented communities, underheard voices. And that just keeps going and going. And now there is also a very strong market for this work. So the art world always worked between the very sublime realm of the art and the very earthly realm of money. And when something really succeeds in the art world, it often has to have that combination that both the art world, the critics, the writers, the artists are interested in it, but there's also money to support it. Collectors, museums, private and public institutions that want to purchase this work. And that is why it gets shown.
Gabriela, as always, you bring us new insights for both how the industry works, how artists get chosen, get popular, get hot, get raised and inspired by their teachers and their mentors and their influences earlier from their work. It's also interesting and also needed at this moment. We've found over the course of time that we've done this, that there are people who are meeting new artists, seeing new ways of looking at the world, and that is indeed one of our great intentions here is to inspire, and we love the comments that we get from people who join and share the artwork that we share for free with anyone that's interested. I'll just this is sort of we're coming down to the end of the year. Obviously, 2023, a year that was tough in so many different ways, and at the same time, with a recognition that as you pointed out, we constantly need new inspirations, new light in our lives, and the creative souls that help create it are something we like to showcase to Israelis, for Israelis, as well as from Israelis and Americans, as true to our name. So we're grateful for everyone being with us today. I'm going to leave you with one program note and then one tmuna, one picture from this period for me being here in Israel at this time. The program note is that we have one more great episode that we'd like you to join us for, that you're invited to. It's not this Sunday, but it's a week from Wednesday, where we will have highlights from our Friendship and Solidarity event that we did in New York. I know that's sort of two New York-based contents and to end the year, but we hope that will be something that you'll enjoy. It includes a fireside chat with the head of the Israel Democratic Institute, the IDI, in conversation with the journalist Tom Friedman from the New York Times, and our chairman of AIFL in Israel, Ambassador Danny Gillerman. We have our recipients of the Partners for Democracy Awards with some great videos about their accomplishments and achievements, as well as some really nice cultural, musical interludes and things that will hopefully make you feel very proud. So come join us. It's Wednesday the 27th. It'll be our last program of this year. And please stay tuned, and we will share more information about the programming that's coming around the corner in 2024 from America-Israel Friendship League. Indeed, being here at this hard moment when there are still Israelis in captivity, I was privileged to be with friends in the West Galilee community of Har Chalutz, where a group of musicians were sending their artistic words and music for one of the captives, who is himself a musician, Alon Ohel. And they played music for him. And it was really powerful because the intention was they felt something that he as a musician would understand. And it's that sort of hope, and it's that sort of spirit of light and of life that I want to leave you with, in the hopes and prayers that all the captives will come back, that our artistic and creative works that people create are done to better the world, and indeed that's a bond that both America and Israel hold together. We hope that you will bring more light into the world and see more light in the world, whether you're celebrating Christmas, whether you're celebrating the secular New Year, whether you're celebrating Sylvester, as they call it here in Israel, in Europe often for the New Year. We hope that you'll have health and light and safety and joy and creativity. On behalf of all my colleagues at the America-Israel Friendship League, we want to wish you a safe and happy end to the new year, and look forward to seeing you in 2024.